Welcome to part 2 of the video. So hopefully now at this point you still have your notes out and go ahead and write scientific to standard. All right, so same thing as the last video. We're gonna look at a few examples and we're gonna work through some steps to make sure you guys have that to refer back to. So let's first look at a big number. So our first example, let's look at 8.11 times 10 to the third power. Again, just like before, notice if our power is positive, it's a bigger number. So we're gonna have a very similar step one. Our first step is we are going to rewrite our number without the base 10 and without the power. So I'm just going to rewrite and I have 8.11. In step 2, now we need to do our scooting again, but it's going to be based on the power. So if it's a big number, we're going to scoot right. And if it's a smaller number, I should write bigger and then smaller. So if it's a smaller number, we are going to scoot left. And the power, like it did before, guys, the power is going to tell us how many times we scoot. So here we have to the third power, so we're going to scoot three times to the right. So I start at my decimal, 1, 2, 3. Notice I have an empty loop. In my first loop, 1 was in there. In my second loop, I had 1 in there. But on my third, I have an empty loop. If you have empty loops like that, that's where you are going to write. So I'm going to write empty loops. That's where you are writing zeros. So in this empty loop, I'm just going to write a 0. So when I go to 8.11 times 10 to the third power, if I wanted to write that in standard form, that would just mean 8,110. Okay, now let's take a look at a number that's a smaller number. Let's take a look at 7.2. So this was our first example. Let's look at our next example. So 7.2 times 10 to the negative fourth power. And again, we know that our negative powers indicate a small number, and we're going to have to scoot to the left. So step 1, rewrite our number without that times base of 10. So I'm just going to write 7.2. Step 2, if it's a smaller number, we need to scoot left. And again, our power is going to tell us how many times we need to move. So here we need to move four spaces to the left. So I'm going to put my purple marker where that decimal's at, and I'm going to move 4 times. So let's scoot. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to write a decimal point there. Now, where I have the empty loops, I need to write the zeros. So in this first loop, I've got a 7, and that's okay. But I have an empty loop here, so I'm going to write a 0. I have an empty loop here. I'm going to write another 0. And I have an empty loop here, so I'm going to write another 0. So that means that 7.2 times 10 to the negative fourth power in scientific notation, if I write it in standard notation, just like this number, I have 0.00072. And just like before, same number, same value, written 2 ways. Now that you guys have your notes, go ahead and go into the folder and check out what assignment you need to complete for this grid box. See you guys.